Welcome to a new video where we are going to dive into Kenpachi. And I'm pausing because it's dreadful. As much fun as I have with Kenpachi, explaining his kit is so painful, mainly because everything in his kit is not explained properly in the way it should work or it could work. It's mostly like, yeah, I feel like this could work kind of description that he has. Which is why this guide will seem a little bit more over the place than you would usually expect from my guides, right? Because there is so much to talk about and there is so many intricacies that I'm just going to showcase this. I will still provide the text of the abilities on the left bottom corner for you to read. But I have a little bit more freedom when it comes to intersecting the different types of abilities, right? Again, his kit is really complex. If you need timestamps, I have timestamps, but I really highly advise that you watch it all the way through. Now, at the end, I will have a showcase for the Frenzy, just to showcase how his kit works in a real environment, but here we are going to use a training room. Now, before we start, his main mechanic, once you understand how he works, is an ailment-based damage, right? He deals a lot of different damage profiles, and one of the biggest ones is his ailment damage. And just to showcase this real quick, his ailment damage comes in form of a debuff here that needs to be fully applied like Lacerate, but it's called Sever, and this is the Sever. Depending on what you do, the Sever has a different kind of increases to it, like everything else in the game, right? This part here is basically the cleave. This is his core passive. And this core passive, and I want to mention this here, I will mention this later too. This core passive is crucial to your damage. And by crucial, I mean this is the biggest thing that you want to have. And the main reason why I mention this is because what he's going to do with the cleave is going to replicate 20% of the damage that you deal to the target. So when I apply this, right, and I'm using damage here, you can see all the cleave here, right? Basic attacks don't trigger this. Basic attack don't trigger this, and this is really important to understand. Why? Because you have to understand where the damage comes from. So if I'm using the cleave here, for example, and then I'm using the technique, right? Also, no cleave damage. So why is it so important? Because most of your damage comes from the part that deals cleave damage. Ultimate, special attacks, and spiritual pressure burst, right? The major reason why it's so important is because if you don't have proper set stamps, if you have bad stats on your set stamps, and I mean, they don't have to be 300% crit damage, 200% crit rate, and 50 million attack percentage, right? Just good stats, you will double and triple dip into that cleave. And that's why it's so crucial to understand that that damage that you do during the cleave is really important. Which also means that we want to have as much uptime of it as possible, and we want to minimize how many basic attacks and techniques that we are going to use. The major reason why we would want to use technique and the basic attack is to give him a core ability, which is Frenzy, right? So if we do just a basic attack string, that's how you gain a Frenzy. When he jumps up, he deals the step down, and then you gain a Frenzy. You need 2 Frenzies to be able to use his special attack, right? You do this, and now he has a special attack here. Cool. That's the main engine that we are going to play around. Frenzy stacks and spending Frenzy stacks. Now, when it comes to Frenzy stacks, when it comes to his basic attack has a few intricacies that are not explained properly. One of those is that when you dodge, perfect dodge, you're going to hit with his last hit of the basic attack, gaining 1 Frenzy. But this also means that there is a hidden mechanic which can guarantee you 2 Frenzy, even if it's not written on the passive, on the counter itself. So you dodge, you jump up, and then you dodge again, and then you can jump up right away, okay? And this is really important, because this means that you can guarantee yourself 2 frenzies with 1 perfect dodge. which means that you can go right back into the special attack and apply the ailment damage. Really, really important here, okay? Now, let me think how to put this. When you play Kenpachi properly, as you will see later in the rotation section, you're basically not going to use the basic attack at all. Basically, right? Because we have different avenues on gaining Frenzy. The special attack was one. The technique is another one. You gain one Frenzy point with a technique. But you can also gain a second Frenzy point if you wait at the tail end of the animation. He does a cross slash and then you press basic attack. And he will do the last hit of his basic attack here and you gain 2 frenzies. Also, really important, a fully channeled special attack will gain you 1 frenzy back. This part here needs to hit to gain the frenzy. If it doesn't hit, you're not getting the frenzy back, okay? Which means that the basic gameplay is that we want to use his special pressure burst here, right? And then maybe we can dodge or we can use the technique to gain a second one. And then we just go into the special attack, right? And then we get 1 frenzy back and then the whole thing replays. And why is that so important? Why am I emphasizing this so much? Because in normal gameplay, you will have a lot of stuff that you can, for example, counter, which gives you another frenzy, right? And you will be able to perfect dodge, which gives you also another frenzy. So if I'm here, I can go straight into basic attack. I can ignore, by the way, the damage. I can dodge, or not, to gain another frenzy here. If you don't perfect dodge, you saw that cross slash, you're going to the 4th string of the attack, not on the 5th. You have to perfect dodge for the last hit to be enabled. Just really quick mention. Why am I mentioning this? Because his basic attack are not protected. Everything else is. So my technique is protected. I'm not going to showcase this because I'm going to talk about the technique in a moment. His special attack is protected. He has super armor during it. He cannot be stunned out of it, except for special attacks of bosses. Okay? Really, really important. This doesn't count for his basic. He can be interrupted during the basic attack. Except during a recovery frame. That's why it's so important to be able to use the frenzy here. Because when he does this, we can go into special attack, which gives us super armor. As you can see, we are taking the damage still. We are taking less damage, by the way. 60% less damage while in super armor. Like, while we do the attacks. But we are taking less damage and we are not being able to be interrupted. Really, really, really important part there. Also, during the spiritual pressure burst, you're not being able to be hit. When it comes to spiritual pressure burst 2, by the way, the game tells you that you dash forwards. Nah. That's not what's happening. You teleport to the enemy. It doesn't matter where you are. It has a small range in front, right? But look at this range that you have here. It's quite insane. So even if you stand far away and you need to close the gap, you can use this instead of trying to dodge through here and to close the gap. You can also use the special attack. And one of the biggest boss fights who does this quite a lot, who is quite annoying to fight because of this, is Ulquiorra. So if you Ulquiorra teleport somewhere, this is about the range that you need to jump forwards. And then you can just hit right into him, right? Really, really important to understand this. Because this is how you can use the abilities as a gap closer, because uptime beats dashing around, right? Damage uptime is always what you're looking for when it comes to maximizing damage. Now, I'm talking a lot about the abilities, but there is another crucial part in his abilities that are not mentioned. And this has been buffed, by the way. So what you're seeing here, if you have seen anything about Kenpachi pre-buff, forget what you learned. This is the new buffs, this is the new Kenpachi, and this is how it works. No matter what ability, you can swap out of it, right? I can use the technique no matter when, and I can swap out of it. And he will finish all the attacks. I can special attack, and he will finish the attacks. And you get all the benefits from it that you need to. The only exception of hot swapping is when you use the spiritual pressure burst, the first time you have to hit the basic attack. If you don't, he just goes away. He just, nope, I'm out of here. Right? So to do a full breakdown, if you need to have a full hot swap ability on his last spiritual pressure burst, what you need to do is you need to press the button here once, and then you can swap out. And then he finishes it. Really, really important when you play, like, for example, in teams like Eisen, when you play in teams like Hot Swap, like Byakuya, for example, if you don't want to do double support. Now, with that out of the way, we have talked about his basic kit, right? We have talked about what his ability do and what we try to achieve here. One of the major parts of his kit is that he can dodge basically out of everything. Except for the technique. His technique is quite special, because his technique is not only protected, it is also a counter, a soft counter. It doesn't trigger this counter here, and it doesn't trigger the spiritual dissipation, but it does work as a counter. Okay? And the only difference between the technique of countering and not countering is at the very tail end. This part here. As long as his sword is on the ground, he will be able to counter. As you can see here. And from here, you can jump up and you can gain 2 frenzies. Now, if I go a little bit back, I start, I'm at the tail end of my animation with a blade up in the air, I'm not able to counter. You can still counter even if there is no connection between you and the enemy. Really, really important, because in a normal fight, what you want to do with the technique is you want to use it to counter. Let's say you swap out, right? You are in a hot situation, you swap out, and now you have 0 frenzy for whatever reason, and you need 2 frenzy fast to keep up with the pressure, with the damage. So what you can do, this works, by the way, for the dodge abilities too. No matter what ability it is, you can counter it with the technique, if he wants to start fighting me. Nonetheless, you really can use this, as you can see, to give yourself 2 frenzy immediately and to go into the special attack, right? Really, really important. Now, the biggest offender of having a badly written tooltip is his special attack. And I will showcase this real quick. Let's say I'm loading up, I want to do damage, right? Special attack is what gives you uptime on the cleave. Special attack and ultimate. But the ultimate especially works in itself. You don't have to worry about cleaving while having ultimate because it applies it by itself. Special attack, it's where it's at. This is where you're going to lose a lot of damage. This is going to lose you a lot of uptime with him, because you are kinda programmed to let it run, okay? By doing so, you not only overcap spiritual pressure in here if you're at B1, but you can also overcap spiritual pressure, by the way, if you're B0. But just to say, especially at B1, you have to pay attention to the spiritual pressure because you're going to waste a lot of resources. So how can you circumvent that problem? How can you yourself add more to it? And one way to do this is by cancelling out of the special attack. Yes, you heard it right, you can cancel out of it. So what you can do, as soon as you see the first slashes appear, you can dodge out and you swap and you jump straight to the end of it, which means you have already ailment up there. For whatever reason, the game is programmed in a way that the whole of the special attack doesn't really matter, to be honest. It's only the very tail end of the animations that gives you the most boost. Especially when it comes to ultimate charge too. When it comes to the ultimate, a lot of guides that I've seen suggest ultimate charge rate. With this trick, being able to swap out of the special attack by dodging out of the initial attack into the straight end of it, you will be gaining so much more ultimate charge rate that you don't really need ultimate charge rate on your set stamps. You can go full on damage attack percentage. Now, let me showcase this once again and why it's so crucial. You dodge out of it, and now you're protected, and you go into the spiritual pressure, right? And then if you're fighting here, you can basic attack, if you want to, dodge out of it. You don't need to use the technique, because if you use the technique, you cannot dodge out of it. You have to let it run. And you may want to use it as a way to counter the enemy, right? So if he's at you here, like this, counter it, and then straight into the special, dodge out of it, and now look at how much more uptime we have on the ailment. If I do this properly, right? As you can see, we diminish the time that we have a downtime on the cleave by a massive, massive amount. And why are we not using the technique here? Because the technique, even though it adds damage, it doesn't add to the cleave. And we want that cleave, because that's where we get our damage from, right? If I'm doing just normal rotation here, I'm going to do the full rotation with the ultimate here, just to showcase this. And by the way, if you're wondering if you lose a lot of damage by doing this, no. You lose about 3 to 4% by swapping out of it, but you gain a lot more by dodging, by animation cancelling. And it doesn't matter where you do it, you can do it midway, right? Look at how fast we get our ultimate back if we do this like this, by the way. So we're going to use the ultimate. We use technique once. And if you use it to counter, for example, then that's a really good use of the technique, and that's how we want to use it. We're going to use the ultimate, which is Kendo. Doesn't need too much of explanation. You use it, you smash the basic attacks, and then you get ailment damage, and you get a lot of burst. Look at how this part here is divided, right? The technique that we are going to use, it's not that technique damage is not useful, it's that the technique in itself is being used as a defensive tool, because yes, it adds a frenzy to it, but the animation is fairly long. What we can also do with the technique is use it to hot swap to give us ourselves buffs. So for example, we have Kisuke in here with Yachi in here. Yachi is going to be hot swapped once, right? So what we can do is we can use him and then swap into Kisuke, give us the buffs, right? And once we get our buffs, we use the ultimate. Let's do the full breakdown here real quick. And then we can do some basics here, right? Maybe he starts countering us and we can parry. We swap out, we cancel out of it, sorry, not swap. We cancel out of it. And now we can still switch back once we do this attack, because now we have the Gigai, and if you have a B2 Gigai, then you add damage and stuff, right? And that's how you want to play. You don't really want to use the technique here to do the damage. You want to use the technique to swap out of your character, because you can also counter once you're swapping out of it. So let me reset this real quick. As you can see, he's still countering here. That's how you want to use the technique. Yes, his technique deals damage, and yes, not using it could cost you damage in the long run. But the point is, if you can gain frenzy from it and using it as a counter and using it in a strategic way, you don't really have to use it on cooldown. And that's what I want to bring forward here. Now, when it comes to his damage rotation and his basics of his damage rotation are what I've shown you here. That said, there is another component to it. Once you are in the special attack, you can dodge multiple times. I don't know if he is able to not get knocked up, but I hope so that I can show this. You can dodge here, straight into it, and you can dodge again and again, only after he jumps up for the step down. That's when it doesn't work anymore. Okay? Once again, we dodge, We dodge again, we finish the animation, and that's it, right? That's how you can do this. If you dodge at the right time, by the way, at the very end of the animation, you can get another basic attack in. But it's so hard that I'm not going to tell you guys to do this, by the way. Because the timing needs to be really, really right. And on mobile, even on emulator, it's not always a guaranteed. So we are not going to incorporate this in our rotations. As you can see, the damage that you will be able to do while you're in fight because of the dodging, because of the way you gain frenzy is much, much higher. Similarly to Gin, who gains techniques when he perfect dodges, Kenpachi gains a lot of it during everything that he does too. You cannot dodge out of the technique, by the way. You will cancel the animation, which is okay if you need to, but it's not advised. And even though his spiritual pressure burst is advised as something that can be super armored, the fact of the matter is that you are invincible while doing that. So if you have an attack, for example, like Ulquiorra's Hard Stab, right? That's when you can use it to quote-unquote dodge it. It doesn't work with Byakuya's Senkei. It will kill you regardless. Now, you can use this at the very last moment. And this part here, by the way, always stuns. He will always knock down with it. I haven't seen it once not being able to knock down knocking down the enemy. Which is a really, really strong thing if you need to hard control your boss, for example. So this is always a knockdown. Man, I'm getting light dizziness just talking about this kid. It's so much. That said, use the training room to practice this, right? Now, when it comes to his kit as a whole, it doesn't seem too complicated, right? But the matter of the fact is that you need to learn and you need to understand where exactly on your device you can input those so that you don't mess up your inputs, okay? The next part is also, during his ultimate, he will only be dealing basic attacks. Yes, they will deal ultimate damage, but they're still counted as basic attacks, okay? Really important. The main reason why this is important is because once you do the whole rotation shenanigan stuff, we're going to cancel out of this, right into it. Look at how much ultimate we gain by just being able to cycle through our stuff so much faster. And by the time you are done with it, your technique is on cooldown anyways, right? So that's another reason why you're not going to use the technique too much. Now we have a full Bankai. I wanted to say Bankai. No, we don't have a Bankai. We have Kendo. We're going to use Kendo here real quick. And the way this works is you are going to press basic attacks. And with basic attacks, you're going to load your ultimate charge rate there. And usually what happens is that once he hits the last part to make it full, he yells, "Wah!" And that's when you want to hit the Kendo. If you wait too long, the cleave will fall off. Okay? And if you're not paying attention, you have only 15 seconds to do the whole rotation to use it, else he will go into the ultimate by itself. Similar to Bankai Ichigo, actually. Now, we have it on cooldown. I just want to showcase this real quick. How fast he can gain ultimate charge rate. So that you understand why I'm saying that you don't have to invest in his ultimate charge. Okay? We still have 6 seconds left. I'm just going to do anything here really, and we are going to have it on cooldown right now. You swap in a double support setup. You don't swap out much. If you want to play him with Aizen, for example, you may have to use some ultimate charge in your kit. He doesn't need too much, but if you find the need for ultimate charge rate, go for it. I'm not going to advise against it if it makes you feel better on how to play him. Right? But I'm just saying, in a double support setup, which I would highly recommend to play him with, it's not really needed. Now, another aspect of his ultimate here is that you can, even though you have damage reduction, you can dodge out of it, which is quite crucial for some bosses. Some bosses will give you damage benefits once you dodge out of it. Ulquiorra, Tower of Trial 24, Floor 10, 24 is one of the premier example of this. Which means that once you use it, as you can see, I can use this to just dodge the attacks. I don't get any benefits out of it, really, but just knowing that you can dodge without interrupting your basic attacks is crucial. Also, because you are perfect dodging, for all those that don't know, perfect dodge gives you a really small time window where you have increased attack speed, which means that the increased attack speed will help you out by being able to do more damage more quickly and ramp up his ultimate faster, okay? This is just a small thing, but it all adds up in the end. Now, having said that, that's his basic kit. We have the breakdown on his abilities, right? Now, when you play in teams, I have to go over Yachiyo real quick, because there are a little bit of asterisks when it comes to her. And I have to mention her here real quick, because she's not... I mean, her guide is 2 minutes long, because it's all in her stamps and in her kit that how it works. But generally speaking, you just give her a crap ton of ultimate charge rate, which means that you are going to be able to use her ultimate on cooldown. That's what you're looking for. And once she reaches 25%, 50%, 75%, you get spectate and stuff like that, right? But her passive is increased by 1.5 times when paired with Kenpachi, which is massive. So this part here gets up to 15% instead of 10%. And then you have the attack boost, which is 20%? 30%? 20%, which gets up to 30%, right? There you go, that's the way. And this inspiration, she gives it at 50, 100%, and also the inspiration holds for 6 seconds, and it gives 10% slash damage, which is increased by this passive here. So to gain the maximum amount of buffs, she needs to have a lot of ultimate charge rate. In my case, it's 200. 190 is fine too. 160, 170 is too low. Which is why I gave her Blooming Sakura stamps, right? Ultimate charge rate in here, and then ultimate charge rate here. And if you can give substats on ultimate charge rate, that would be fantastic too. Now, when it comes to her buffs, and why I'm mentioning this right now is because the fact of the matter is that depending on the investment level of your Yachiyo, this crit rate here will be either 15%, 20%, or whatever value that you guys have on your Yachiyo. Which means pairing Yachiyo up with Kenpachi, you either fully go all in on pairing her up with him so that you can base your stats on Kenpachi himself. Because for my example here, I have 43%, right, in here. I also have another stamp, by the way, which is a 32% crit rate. If I equip this, for example, if I have Yachiyo's buffs up, I gain a 100% crit rate because of her 30%. So you want to base your crit rate depending on what Yachiyo is, but you have to commit to it. Else, if you don't want to use Yachiyo in your teams with Kenpachi, don't build him for Yach. Because, again, depending on your investment level, this can change. In that case, you could even argue that Sajin would be a little more reliable because he gives crit damage on his B1, right? And this is the only thing that you need him for, is the B1 there. And he also gives crit rate. It's in his passive, I think. Where was it? Here. 15%, and then it goes up to 20% if I'm not mistaken. So this means if you have fully built your Sajin, you have 20% crit rate, which means crit rate cap would be at 80%. And if you have the B2 here, which is for every 1% ailment damage bonus Kenpachi deals, his crit is increased. Which means at 60% crit ailment damage, you get 30% crit rate, which means again his crit cap, soft crit cap, would be at 50% with Sajin, or 40% with Yachiyo. So this is why Yachiyo is either you commit to Yachiyo or you don't. Really, really important, because you don't want to overinvest in crit rate and put this to waste when you cannot use it fully, okay? Really, 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 really important. I really want to put this in here. Now, when it comes to teams, this is the standard layout that you have, the standard team setup that you can have. You can use Eisen here. Works really, really well. Actually, defense down is really strong for him, especially when you can pair it with the cleave damage that he does. So as soon as you have the cleave damage up, you really want to push damage with Kenpachi. When both are equal. So if you have a B6 Kenpachi or a B6 Eisen, depending on who has higher investment, you want to give more field time to that character, obviously. Then, when it comes to double support, you can also use Byakuya. Especially early on, really, really good character. He falls off late if you don't get any dupes in him. So it's kinda hard to recommend him for high level play for endgame players. But in early on, like level 50, level 60, level 70, as a character, not as you as a player, he is really valuable. And you can stop at level 70. Except if you really like his gameplay style, if you really like to play with him, you can use him, I don't care. But then this whole section is moot for you. When it comes to double support, you have two options. If you want to commit to Yachiro, you pair Sajin with Kenpachi, right? Because this enables you to use Kisuke in a secondary team. Obviously, Kisuke is the best support in the game, so you want to have him with Kenpachi if you just need one team. But if you have a B1 Sajin works really, really well too. Then depending on your set stamps, of course, crit rate and so forth and so on, because Yachiro has only 60% uptime. With her crit buff, you really want to use the burst. Rangiku still works fine. She's a great part to put in here. But because of the way that Kenpachi's kit works, it's not that great. Because you use a lot of this Heineko's mark, right? If you guys are not aware, let me showcase this real quick. Her Heineko's mark is this part here. And then when you release a technique, right, or special attack, you will be using Ash Blades. Major issue is that usually when you use this, and I will showcase this here real quick, when you use this, it's outside of a cleave window. Not that the Ash mark goes into the cleave window, but usually you line up everything for the burst, which means Yachiro's ultimate during the burst and so forth and so on. Now, if you're just playing him, you're going to use a lot of marks. Just the special attack alone is able to basically empty by itself, right? So she has a lot of downtime before you can get a full benefit of Heineko's mark. It can be good or bad, okay? I'm not saying that she is really, really bad, because the next part that she brings is that she increases ailment damage of everybody else, which really benefits Kenpachi too, especially during the cleave window. So she is a great support, but don't bring her just for the Heineko's mark, bring her to build her as a ailment damage support. Just as I mentioned real quick here. I don't have to swap out again. Now, when it comes to the rotation by itself, I will just show the basic rotation in animation cancelling. This is not min-max in the sense that I don't want to show the min-max version of this, because I don't think it's feasible for people who play on mobile devices to do this as I do it on the emulator. Which is, I tried this on my phone, but my phone is trash, so I wasn't able to do this as smoothly as I did it on the emulator, which is why I'm just going to showcase the general idea of the rotation, and then you can use this as a point of reference to increase your own damage depending on how well you can put the input into your device, okay? We are doing a 120-second test, mostly just to showcase the rotations, different type of stages during the time frames that you have. Most boss fights have 3 minutes, 2 minute stages, which is why I highly recommend when you do this kind of testing, do 2 minutes. Now, you have two ways to initiate this, and I prefer this part here where you initiate with Kenpachi. Main reason why is it gives you more flexibility in how to use Kisuke. For those that don't know, Kisuke's Kigai is able to iframe. There you go. Okay? Having Kisuke drop in after, this is usually when the bosses attack. So you can start iframing, you can start dropping the Kisuke into it to perfect dodge, right? And then you can iframe the last part of the attack and go straight into his ultimate. So this is one of the reasons why I like to start with Kenpachi. Also, it gives me flexibility if the enemy does an attack right off the gate. Oh, my bad. I wanted to do the counter. Then I can use my technique to just gain straight up 2 frenzies, right? Or it gives me the flexibility to swap out and do the rotation from here. Okay? That's why I personally like engaging with Kenpachi first. You can do as you wish. The matter of fact is, those 3 seconds are not going to cost you because you can swap into Yachiro later. She's not protected in any way when she uses the technique, and she needs to use the technique for her to be able to spectate, right? So, how this works, I told you guys, starting here, we're going to use the technique. Let's say you want to swap out, you go into Kisuke, you use his abilities, into his ultimate, into Yachiro. We want her to be able to spectate. Oops, I pressed it wrong. And then we can start wailing away at the enemy. Usually, if you have an attack here from the enemy, you can use it to dodge and gain a second frenzy, else you have to do this. Again, you want to finish the animation for the frenzy there. Now, you can use the technique here, for example, or you could use the last bit of the attack to do the swap into Kisuke. It really doesn't matter, it depends on the bosses a little bit. And then we go back into him. We have the special attack that we can use. We are going to use her ultimate here. And then we're going to swap here. And as you can see, if I do this wrongly, Kenpachi will not finish his attack. Which means we don't have ailment on the boss. And when I'm going to use the ultimate here, I'm not going into an ailment damage. This damage here is not being representative of what I can really do. But I can do swapping out of here, like this. And if you have the BQ of Kisuke, you can swap out during the ultimate. And then you can make sure that you hit the last hit of the Kendo into the Gigai to even get more damage out of it, right? And that's why you see this much of damage. Then use the ultimate on cooldown in this part here, right? Not much going on here. You don't have to swap into Kisuke if you don't want to. You can do it here, for example. Just make sure that you have a 100% uptime on its ultimate. In lower levels means that you kinda have to do this. And if you don't get the last hit of the special attack, you need to do a lot of special basic attacks or techniques even to get to the 2 frenzies, right? In this case, just finish the spiritual pressure burst, use the ultimate. We're going to swap into him real quick because we have the Kendo ready. I'm not going to put this into the dissipation, I just want to showcase just the general idea of the rotation here. I'm not going to min-max the damage here. And then you can use it. Not going to gain any frenzy from it, so it doesn't really matter too much. His Gigai comes back, so we can just use the Kendo right here. And then out of this we can use the special attack. Cancel out of it. Right. Into his special. And then we are going to finish with Kisuke for style points. And that's the idea of the rotation. And as you can see, even me not pushing a lot of damage, even me doing mistakes, at B1 he pulls a crap ton of damage. A massive amount of damage. It's quite insane actually. And if you do everything proper, then the damage that he provides, let me see if I can, I will drop the screenshot right here, and you will see the difference between a properly done rotation and my rotation right now in difference in stats, right? Because it's quite big if we are being honest. You will see that the ailment damage is much higher usually. If I can pull up my screen here, but by much higher I mean it's about 4 to 5% higher than the ultimate will be, right? And that's how the damage profile should look like. As you can see, Relentless Pursuit, even though we used it quite a bit, it doesn't deal that much of a damage. Which is why we really want to focus to use the utility that you gain to iframe, to get frenzy stacks, and to reduce the amount of time that we are in the technique. Now, if you're going to look at this the same way, like for low accounts, right? You don't have Yachu, maybe you want to do something like this because you don't have a high investment, you don't feel comfortable with using Yachu, then we can do something like this. In this case, what I would like to showcase, I will do this as 60-second rotation, just to showcase the general idea when using Byakuya. Me, personally, I don't prefer using Byakuya here. I think he works really, really well with Bankai Ichigo, not that well with him. Now, similar idea. We're going to use the technique. We're going to hot swap into him so that we can then use Kisuke and start stacking up these resistances down, which is quite important. And then we can go back, we do some basic attacks here, last hit, into special, which enables us to spam the crap out of it, right? And then we're going to start a spiritual pressure burst, and here we can swap out. And this is basically how you play with Byakuya, because this is really it, this is the whole rotation. You're going to swap back into him, you can use the technique here just to get the resistance down going. You can jump up, technique. We're going to wait, because we want a frenzy. Now we swap out. And you can maximize this, by the way. You can use the Gigai here, and then swap back into his ultimate. Really important, make sure that you have all the debuffs up that you need to, because his ultimate won't trigger the battlefield skill. Okay? You can also line it up with Byakuya's Bankai, so that you get even more resistance downs, okay? And this is the general idea when you play with Byakuya. Now, personally, like I said once before, I don't really like it. In the same way, when you use him with Aizen, for example, you really want to understand that you can animation cancel out of it. But one of the major benefits of Aizen is that you gain counters. So you don't really care about the last hits that much, because you will have frenzy enough. Same thing here. Start with the technique. Dropping Kisuke, right? And then what I like to do, except for the Kyoga Suigetsu, when I swap into my Aizen, I use the battlefield skill here. I like to go into Kenpachi first, because I want to animation cancel, right? Into him. Yes, if you have the B2, it's kind of awkward to reposition yourself for the Gigai, but then you can use this here and you can just swap out of it, and it makes it much smoother. You have a much higher uptime on Kenpachi himself, which means more damage in general. Same thing here, again. There we go. Now, I'm going to swap out here with the ultimate just to showcase this. If you're in the ultimate, because of how Illusion works with his core stamp, you want to stack up the damage quite early by swapping out first into Kisuke. Use his abilities here. And then swap out into Kenpachi. This enables both to do the most damage, and then use the special attack. Depending on if you are already at the ultimate, you can use the ultimate here. But if not, you're just going to use the special attack. You auto-cancel out of it by using his ultimate early, which means his ultimate is going on cooldown, only when you use the Kyoga Seiketsu, by the way, which means you can cycle through it faster to line it up properly with Kenpachi's ultimate. Okay? And this is the general idea when you use Aizen with them. Again, you can play this like it fits your style, in the sense that how you can input those commands properly. Okay? Really important. Really important. I really want to stress this out. Don't try to replicate what I'm doing, because I'm playing on an emulator and my input sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't. But when it works, I don't have time. I swear, I'm so inept at using mobile phones, mobile devices, when it comes to gaming. I don't even know how you guys do this, by the way. Chapeau to you. My highest respect to anybody who can clear anything on mobile. I'm like, if I used it on mobile, I would just be on Reddit and like, hey, auto is so cool, it's so good. It enables me to play the game. Now, jokes all aside, this is how the basic rotation works, okay? He's really, really flexible once you understand the basic needs of his kit. Once again, I really hope that this was really helpful. Let me know in the comments down below if this improved your performance with Kenpachi. And again, a like would be fantastic here. Now let's talk about boundaries. As you guys can see, I did a thing. It was a really cool stream. I'm not going to apply them yet. If you want to see them, you have to catch me online. Let me close down my notes real quick. There we go. Now, when it comes to boundaries or weapon, this is one of the major questions that only Kenpachi has so far, is the question, should you go for his weapon? Because his weapon is mega important. You remember when I said that the special attack gives you 1 frenzy? Yeah, this is why. Okay? This is exactly why. And also, it increases your damage dealt by every technique, which means spiritual pressure burst and your own technique. This weapon is so strong, it's quite amazing how much power it gives to your Kenpachi. Okay? Not only that, but it also adds the triple dip that I was talking about on the ailment damage, because a critical hit now deals additional damage of that attack. So the higher your ailment is, it crits, it double dips into his weapon. That's why you saw the weapon so high up in the rankings when it came to damage. The only weapon in the game with so much of an impact. Yes, Eisen exists, but I'm talking full assaults here. Toshiro doesn't have a weapon like this. Really, really good, but not that good. Bankai Ichigo has a really good weapon, but it doesn't fundamentally change how much you put into resources into his character. It's really strong, you really want his weapon, right? But the damage difference between his weapon and him without weapon is something we haven't seen yet. That's why we have to answer the question, should you go for his weapon? And this is my take on it. If you're on a budget, right, and you can guarantee for your next character that you want to pull, you can guarantee at least 1 weapon, and you can guarantee dupes of this, it would be a budget version of going for dupes for his weapon. Now, I want to make this very clear. Because we have 2 different systems in tickets, the thing is you can also consume items here. And you can gain these items slowly by dismantling epic weapons. Which means that in the gacha here, at a certain point, you will have the standard SSRs and you will have their weapons. And depending on the character that uses it, you don't need more than 1 copy. For example, if you look at this, it doesn't change anything. So if you get more max level effect, it's only his own special attack damage. But the thing is, you're not going to build him for damage. He can provide a lot of damage, but if your full assault character is built in a way that his crit damage outdoes his own damage, why should you go for his weapon? So when you pull weapons that you don't need for your characters, for your free-to-play standard SSRs, you can salvage them and use them as food for your Kenpachi weapon, for example. That's why I'm saying to be... Yes, it's a budget version to use your tickets for, if you want that weapon, because it's really, really impactful. Especially this part here, it gives up to 50%, which is an insane amount, right? But be aware of the fact that you could also salvage into it over time. When it comes to his boundaries, why I'm saying this is because his B1 lost a lot of value after the buffs. He will still add a lot of special spiritual pressure to his own, even without using special attacks, because you have basic attacks, you have techniques, you have so many ways of adding spiritual pressure now, because before the buffs he couldn't gain anything but through special attacks and technique, so his basic attack did nothing. You have now a way to do this. Also, this part here, damage dealt by special attacks, is nice, but as you have seen, his damage really also comes from being able to double dip into ailment. So the B1 and the B2 aren't that necessary for his gameplay. He's very similar to Gin. They add quite a bit of damage, right? But strictly speaking, his damage is outperformed in his weapon instead of his boundaries. Also, another problem here is that if you have his B2, and this may sound minor, but if you have his B2, you now have another crit rate component into your kit, into your set stamps. If you don't have set stamps to go with it, if you cannot swap out set stamps from, like I can, for example, from crit rate to crit damage, then what's the point of the B2? If you cannot crit cap, the B2 is pointless. If you can crit cap, and you cannot change crit damage, for example, or you cannot swap to a high crit damage build, then what's the point of the B2? It sounds harsh, but that's the reality, and you can disagree as much as you want with me. Yes, it is fantastic if you can provide the stats. It is fantastic early on, because early on it's really, really hard to get crit rate, but why are you pulling a B2 at lower levels? There is no need for it. The content is easy enough at lower levels that you don't need B2s. Actually, the content is in general easy enough that you don't need any boundaries, right? Let's make this clear. But if you want to invest in a character for longevity, his B2 and his B1 aren't that amazing. And it causes issue when you try to pair him in different teams, because now you have to think about his crit rate, as you're going to waste either his boundary or the crit damage, which feels bad. Now, of course, B3 is going to give you the exclusive avatar, which you need to have, in my opinion, because this is a manga and it's an anime, and you know you have to shout Bankai, for example, to make more to do more damage with Bankai, and you have to have the PFP if you play with the character to do more damage, right? That's how it works, I think. There is a hidden perk. If you have not heard out the sarcasm out of my statement here, I'm being sarcastic. I'm sorry. Then his B4. This part here is amazing. This is a multiplier on your special attack and spiritual pressure burst and ultimate. This is a baseline multiplier, so everything you do damage-wise gets multiplied by 30%. It's very, very similar to the core stamp here that Gin has, this part here. Every time you read damage dealt by something, that's a multiplier, an additional multiplier, which is always amazing to have, because it's not in a damage bucket, it doesn't get diminished in any kind of ways, okay? His B5 adds the title and everything else, and then his B6, this one is crazy. His B6 is absolutely insane. The question, and this is just for me personally, if you go to B4, it's nice, but Kenpachi is definitely a character that you want to get to B6 if you really want to max him out. Because he not only gains 60% crit damage every time an enemy is inflicted with cleave, right? He also gains ailment mastery by 40%. And what we know so far is that ailment mastery is basically a 4 times multiplier to ailment. So a 40% is a 160% ailment damage bonus, which is insane. Because when you put everything together, you have seen how much ailment damage we already do, and this amplifies it even further, which makes this weapon even more crazy, because now you're quadruple dipping into his damage. That's why he is a really high investment character. You have pulled for him, else you wouldn't watch this guide. But if you really want to invest into him, make sure to give him the best of the best that you can give. And then he will be absolutely fantastic, and he will have a longevity like nobody else, in my opinion. Yes, Gin is fantastic. Spare me with the comments about Gin. He's great. I'm not talking about Gin, I'm talking about Kenpachi, because I'm glazing him right now, okay? And with that said, that's basically it, right? That's the guide? Yes, that's the guide. Like I said, once again, if you're on a budget, if you want to be increasing his damage and you need to be taking care of the next character, making sure that you can get next character even without weapon, for example, if it's tactician or support, whatever the case might be. Whenever you're watching this, make sure to go for the weapon first, because it's different tickets, it costs less to get the weapon, and the mileage for the same kind of weapon for 2 dupes that you could get for 1 dupe in Kenpachi is much, much higher, right? With that said, either way, you cannot go wrong. If you want to go all in with Kenpachi, do this. I would highly recommend, if you don't have the avenue, if he's not your favorite character, if you don't want to invest into him, you don't need dupes for him to perform well. It is a nice increase, but it's not necessary. You're much better served with a weapon if you can afford it. Also, real quick, his core stamp, it's great. Okay? It enables you, especially in AoE situations, that you can extend cleave. That, and increase the ultimate damage. As you can see, his whole kit is basically just double, triple, and quadruple DPing into his mechanics. And that's why this guide has been structured a little bit differently. And I'm really, really sorry if this is another, it's basically another 1 hour video. With that said, once again, thank you so much for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed this guide. I will show gameplay from the Frenzy Feast so that you can see it in action and see how fun Kenpachi can be once you play him right. And if I'm mistaken with something, let me know. And yes, I value him higher than Gen. I'm sorry, I have to say this. This is a Kenpachi guide. I love Kenpachi, he's fantastic. Miss me with Gin. All jokes aside, thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one, and take care. Bye bye.
Take it.